You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Shalom, this is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and I want to welcome you to another episode of SLA Insights, where we are applying second language acquisition principles to the teaching and learning of biblical and ancient languages. I'm continuing to talk about vocabulary learning, vocabulary acquisition, and I've covered some of the theoretical concepts, some things that are involved in learning vocabulary, what it means to learn a word, some of the factors that will affect vocabulary learning and retention and retrieval. And in the past couple episodes, I've been looking at more specific activities that would promote vocabulary learning or vocabulary acquisition, including flashcards and imaging and the keyword technique. So this week, I'm going to cover what's called a procedure, and a specific procedure called recycled words. The approach uses, again, what's called a procedure, that is a series of steps that involve different teaching activities, sort of targeted at the same goal, and that is, in this case, vocabulary learning. The procedure was created by Mary E. Blake and Patricia Majors, and published in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy in volume 39, if you wanted to look it up and see what they have to say in greater detail. So the procedure is intended to learn vocabulary through a variety of modes and approaches. So according to Nation, who's kind of the vocabulary learning guru for second language acquisition, he says vocabulary activities must meet the following conditions to result in learning: interest, understanding, repetition, deliberate attention, and generative use, that is, the use of a word in a new context. And so this recycled words approach is one that will meet all of those criteria. However, I want you to keep in mind that this is not the only procedure you could use. The goal here is to use, again, a variety of activities and approaches to be able to encounter these new vocabulary words in different contexts, in different ways, and use them so as to enhance and promote deeper learning of the words. So this particular procedure has 5 interrelated stages. Some of them involve direct learning, that is conscious, obvious, direct learning, and some indirect learning, where the student is more gleaning from context what the word means. So here are the 5 stages. I'll go through them briefly and then return and go in more depth about what each stage is about. So the 5 steps are: first, pre-reading activities. The second is an oral reading strategies and response. The third is vocabulary learning through focused word study. The fourth, evaluating word knowledge through quizzes and tests. And the fifth, collaborative writing workshop. All right, so let's get into a little more detail what each of these steps or stages will entail. First of all, this particular strategy is going to assume, the procedure is going to assume a specific text. So before you start the procedure, you're going to want to first identify your text or passage that you're going to work with for your students. Could be a passage of scripture, could be something that you've created from scratch, could be something else that's in your target language. Then, once you've identified the text, you're going to identify the unknown words, the new vocabulary items that you want your students to learn from this particular passage. And we're going to assume that this is somewhere in the middle of their learning, so they know some words already, but there's going to be some new words in the new passage that they will need to learn. So you pull out those new vocabulary items in this pre-reading activity, and read through the list together. Just the target language words. No glosses, no definitions, just the words. Teacher first, with students echoing to work on pronunciation. Now, an alternative activity that you could use, or a second one if you want, in this pre-reading stage, is to create a pre-quiz, a multiple choice quiz that gives the students the word and then a few choices. Which of these do you think this word means? It's encouraging the students to guess the meaning of each item. And I've talked before about how guessing from context is a valid and even important skill to have as a second language reader, to be able to get a sense of what this word might mean without looking it up in the dictionary. It heightens the students' awareness of the vocabulary, it primes them, and it increases their motivation for wanting to learn it. They now have a reason to know it. So when it comes time to actually getting a formal definition or gloss for the word, they're going to be more ready and more primed to learn that word as it comes. So again, this multiple choice pre-quiz where they're guessing at the meaning of each of the new vocabulary items is another option for the pre-reading level. So that's the first stage in this procedure called recycled words. The second stage is going to be an oral reading of the text, where the students will take turns reading the full text, including the new vocabulary items, out loud. Now, as they read, they're going to encounter these new vocabulary items. They still have not received a formal definition, but by reading them in context, they're now going to start getting a better sense of what the word means. And at this point, if they've done the pre-quiz for the pre-reading activity, if they've done the pre-quiz, they can go back and change their answer based on the context of the text to say, oh, you know what, I think maybe this word actually means something different than what I thought. And again, they're processing, they're thinking, they're getting primed and ready for the actual meaning of the word once you get to it. Now, that leads us to the third stage of this procedure, and that is the focused word study. This will be the first time that they actually receive direct instruction and any kind of clear indication of what these words mean. So you would start at this stage with just some basic flashcards. And if you want to review how to do flashcards, go back a couple episodes in the podcast where I go over how to do flashcards. So you're going to do the basic flashcards, and then you can play games with the flashcards. You might use memory or Go Fish, where they're matching the L1 word with the L2 word, that is target language, native language, as the matches in those kinds of games. You could also at this stage provide an in-depth discussion of one or two, not all of the words, but a couple that are particularly important for understanding the text and or particularly complex with multiple meanings or nuances, for example, depending on context. So that's the third stage of the recycled words procedure. The fourth is evaluating word knowledge. How much do they know about these words? And this is going to be in the form of a quiz or a test. It could be a more formal quiz where you give them the L2 word, they have to provide the L1 gloss, perhaps, or maybe a matching where they have to match, for example, Hebrew or Greek to English. But you could go more informal with something like a crossword puzzle, where they have to work out the words in the crossword puzzle to demonstrate knowledge of the new words. Another option would be a cloze test, where you provide a text, not the original text, but another text that has a few blanks where they need to fill in the target vocabulary items to complete the text in a meaningful way, demonstrating again that they know not just what the words mean, but how they should be used and where they should be used in the text. So that's the fourth step of this procedure. The fifth and final stage in the procedure is a writing workshop where the students are going to take that list of new vocabulary items and create their own story using those items. Now, this starts with the instructor having already created his or her own story with those words as an example, presenting to the class, giving one more exposure to those words in context, and an example for the students to follow. And then the students will then go either individually or in small groups and create a story using all of, or most of, if they can, the new vocabulary items that have just been presented. So that's the procedure called recycled words, again from Mary Blake and Patricia Majors, officially published in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy in volume 39, if you want to go look it up. But the summary, the goal here, and even if you don't follow their exact stages, the goal is to get more effective learning, moving beyond just simple flashcards, using a variety of modes, a variety of activities. They're hearing the words, they're speaking the words, they're creating with the words, they're recognizing the words, all kinds of things to bring it together to help them understand and more deeply learn those vocabulary items. Notice too that this procedure uses both direct and indirect instruction. The direct instruction coming primarily from stage 3 with the flashcards and some at stage 4 with the testing, but then also quite a bit of indirect instruction where they're reading it in context, using it in context, guessing from context the meaning of these words, helping them to learn and reinforce even further what these words mean and how they're used. This is going to reinforce their memory traces and add further memory cues to assist in future retrieval of these specific vocabulary items. So again, this was recycled words, an approach that uses a procedure or a series of steps involving different teaching activities. And in this case, the idea was the procedure was to not just teach or introduce, but to really deeply learn those vocabulary items in a meaningful environment. Now, in an upcoming episodes, I'm going to continue looking at a few specific activities to help learn and reinforce vocabulary knowledge. I hope you can join me for those. In the meantime, have a great
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.